Hello and welcome to another episode of Skyrim Stories. I am your host LD, and today we will be reading the Argonian account, Book 2, by Warren Jarth. Decimus Scotti emerged from the dirt and reeds, exhausted from running, his face and arms sheathed in red flesh flies. Looking back toward Cyrodiil, he saw the bridge disappear beneath the thick black river, and he knew he was not getting back until the tide went down in a few days' time. The river also held in its adhesive depths his files on the Black Marsh account. He would have to rely on his memory for his contacts in Gideon. Malik was purposefully striding through the reeds ahead. Flailing ineffectually at the flesh flies, Scotti hurried after him. "We're lucky, sir," said the Red Guard, which struck Scotti as extraordinary odd thing to say, until his eyes followed where the man's finger was pointing. "The caravan is here." 21 rusted, mud-spattered wagons with rotten wood and wobbly wheels sat half-sunk in the soft earth ahead. A crowd of Argonians, gray-scaled and great-eyed, the sort of sullen manual laborers that were common in Cyrodiil, pulled at one of the wagons which had been detached from the others. As Scotti and Malik came closer, they saw it was filled with a cargo of blackberries so decayed that they'd become hardly recognizable, more a festering jelly than a wagon load of fruit. Yes, they were going to the city of Gideon, and yes, they said, Scotti could get a ride with them after they were finished unloading the shipment of lumberries. "How long ago were they picked?" Scotti asked, looking at the wagon's rotten produce. "The harvest was in last seed, of course," said the Argonian, who seemed to be in charge of the wagon. "It was now sun's dusk, so they had been en route from the fields for a little over 2 months." Clearly, Scotti thought, there were problems with transportation, but fixing that, after all, was what he was doing here as a representative of Lord Vannick's building commission. It took close to an hour of the berries rotting even more in the sun for the wagon to be pushed to the side, the wagons in front of it and behind to be attached to one another, and one of the 8 horses from the front of the caravan to be brought around to the new independent wagon. The laborers moved with dispirited lethargy, and Scotti took the opportunity to inspect the rest of the caravan and talk to his fellow travelers. 4 of the wagons held benches in them, fit for uncomfortable riders. All the rest were filled with grain, meat, and vegetation in various stages of corruption. The travelers consisted of the 6 Argonian laborers, 3 imperial merchants so bug-bitten that their skin looked as scaly as the Argonians themselves, and 3 cloaked fellows who were evidently Dunmer, judging by the red eyes that gleamed in the shadows under their hoods. All were transporting their goods along this, the Imperial Commerce Road. "This is a road?" Scotti exclaimed, looking at the endless fields of reeds that reached up to his chin or higher. "It's solid ground, of a sort," one of the hooded Dunmer shrugged. "The horses eat some of the reed, and sometimes we set fire to it, but it just grows right back up." Finally, the wagon master signaled that the caravan was ready to go, and Scotti took a seat in the 3rd wagon with the other Imperials. He looked around, but Malik was not on board. "I agreed to get you to the Black Marsh and take you back out," said the Red Guard, who had plumped down a rock in a sea of reeds and was munching on a hairy carrot. "I'll be here when you get back." Scotti frowned, and not only because Malik had dropped the deferential title Sir while addressing him. Now he truly knew no one in Black Marsh, but the caravan slowly ground and bumped forward, so there was no time to argue. A noxious wind blew across the Commerce Road, casting patterns in the endless, featureless expanse of reeds. In the distance, there seemed to be mountains, but they constantly shifted, and Scotti realized they were banks of mist and fog. Shadows flitted across the landscape, and when Scotti looked up, he saw they were being cast by giant birds with long, saw-like beaks, nearly the size of the rest of their bodies. "Hack wings," Shero Gemolus, an Imperial on Scotty's left, who might have been young but looked old and beaten, muttered, "Like everything else in this damnable place, they'll eat you if you don't keep moving. Beggars pounce down and give you a nasty chop, and then fly off and come back when you're mostly dead from blood loss." Scotty shivered. He hoped they'd beaten Gideon before nightfall. It was then it occurred to him that the sun was on the wrong side of the caravan. "Excuse me, sir," Scotty called to the wagon master. "I thought you said we were going to Gideon." The wagon master nodded. "Why are we going north then, when we should be going south?" There was no reply but a sigh. Scotty confirmed with his fellow travelers that they too were going to Gideon, and none of them seemed very concerned about the circuitous route they were getting there. The seats were hard on his middle-aged back and buttocks, but the bumpy rhythm of the caravan and the hypnotic waving reeds gradually had an effect on him, and Scotty drifted off to sleep. He awoke in the dark some hours later, not sure where he was. The caravan was no longer moving, and he was on the floor, under the bench next to some small boxes. There was voices speaking a hissing, clicking language Scotty didn't understand, and he peeked out between someone's legs to see what was happening. The moons barely pierced the thick mist surrounding the caravan, and Scotty did not have the best angle to see who was talking. For a moment, it looked like the gray wagon master was talking to himself, but the darkness had movement and moisture, in fact, glistening scales. It was hard to tell how many of these things there were, but they were big black, and the more Scotty looked at them, the more details he could see. When one particular detail emerged, huge mouths filled with dripping needle-like fangs, Scotty slipped back under the bench. Their black little eyes had not fallen on him yet. The legs in front of Scotty moved and then began to thrash as their owner was grabbed and pulled out of the wagon. Scotty crouched further back, getting behind the little boxes. He didn't know much about concealment, but had some experience with shields. He knew that having anything, in between you and bad things was always good. A few seconds after, the legs had disappeared from sight. There was a horrible scream, and then a second, and a third. Different timbres, different accents, but the same inarticulate message. Terror and pain, horrible pain. Scotty remembered a long-forgotten prayer to the god Stendar and whispered it to himself. Then there was silence, ghastly silence that lasted only a few minutes, but which seemed like hours, years. And then the carriage started rolling forward again. Scotty cautiously crawled out from under the carriage. Sharo Gamilus gave him a bemused grin. "There you are," he said. "I thought the Nagas took you." "Nagas? Nasty characters," Gamilus said, frowning. "Puff adders with legs and arms, 7 feet tall, 8 when they're mad. Come from the inner swamp, and they don't like it here much, so they're particularly peevish. You're the kind of posh Imperial they're looking for." Scotty had never in his life thought of himself as posh. His mud and flesh-fly bespectacled clothing seemed eminently middle class, at best to him. "What would they want me for?" "To rob, of course," the Imperial smiled. "And to kill. You didn't notice what happened to the others?" The Imperial frowned, as if struck by thought. "You didn't sample from those boxes down below, did you? Like the sugar, do you?" "Gods, no," Scotty grimaced. The Imperial nodded, relieved. "You just seem a little slow. First time to Black Marsh, I gather." "Oh, hey-ho, hist-piss." Scotty was just about to ask Gamilus what that vulgar term meant when the rain began. It was an inferno of foul-smelling, yellow-brown rain that washed over the caravan, accompanied by the growl of thunder in the distance. Gamilus worked to pull the roof up over the wagon, glaring at Scotty until he helped with the laborious process. He shuddered, not only from the cold damp, but from contemplation of the disgusting precipitation, pouring down on the already nasty produce in the uncovered wagon. "We'll be dry soon enough," Gamilus smiled, pointing out into the fog. Scotty had never been to Gideon, but he knew what to expect. A large settlement more or less laid out like an imperial city, with more or less imperial-style architecture, and all the imperial comforts and traditions, more or less. The jumble of huts half sunk in the mud was decidedly less. "Where are we?" asked Scotty, bewildered. "Hixenag," replied Gemellus, pronouncing the queer name with confidence. "You were right. We were going north when we should have been going south." This has been another episode of Skyrim Stories. Thank you for listening. Once again, I am LD. If you like the story, please leave a like below and subscribe for more. We'll be reading more books as I find them, so thank you very much. Have a good night. Bye-bye.